The WNBA Draft has now come and gone, and W training camps open in just 9 days. But on draft night, there was something that I kept thinking about, and a question that I wanted to answer. How has the WNBA's perception in popular culture changed over time and in recent years? Well, I've got someone right here who knows all about that. It's LaChina Robinson. She's here to break it all down with me. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast. It starts right now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. You are locked on to women's basketball. Yes, that is a new theme song. It is my first time using it. I'm Jackie Powell, and I'm one of your hosts on this program. Typically on Fridays, I cover the New York Liberty at the Next, and I've covered women's basketball nationally at many other places. We want to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember that Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by everyone at the Next, a place where we cover women's basketball all the time, and we tell the stories that need to be told every day. Subscribe now to support the staff that works oh so hard to bring you this coverage that matters oh so much. That's $9 a month or $72 per year. Find us at thenexthoops.com and subscribe. Also, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Okay, so last time you and I were together, dear listener, I had Sabrina Merchant of The Athletic on, and we discussed all of the pre-draft chatter and rumors that we heard from talent evaluators around the league. But today we shift gears and we reflect a little bit on where the WNBA is as it enters in season 28. So I have LaChina Robinson here, and in segment one, we're going to discuss what some of the previous perceptions of the W have been with the help of a column from Maya Moore that was almost written a decade ago. Then we'll address how the most recent draft sort of changes those perceptions. And then we'll talk about how WNBA history matters in this whole conversation. But anyway, LaChina, welcome to the show. It is an honor to have you here. I have been listening to you in many places for a very long time, so this is really exciting for me.
Thank you for having me, Jackie, and appreciate all the work you do in covering women's basketball.
I appreciate that. So let's get started. Let's go back in time a little bit. How would you describe the WNBA's perception in popular culture, I guess, prior to the pandemic?
It's always been a journey for the WNBA to connect in spaces when it comes to culture, period. And that has everything to do with the lack of exposure and the lack of visibility, whether that's sponsorship and brand deals that allow the league and its players to be prominently placed in places outside of sport, whether that's just the overall media coverage, which has grown a couple of ticks percentage-wise for women's sports over the last few years, but still there's a lot of work to do. So though these women have had interest in culture and have been expressing themselves culturally for many years, the recognition just has not been there consistently. And there are a few reasons why I believe we're seeing a change. And I want to go back to the issue at hand, right? It starts with how women are viewed and their influence on culture, how Black women are viewed and their influence on culture. There's been an invisibility, if you will, of women in Black women in those spaces. But a few things I think have contributed to what we saw on Monday night's draft, which was just a display of a lot of different things, right? The 2024 draft class is just a phenomenal class, a game-changing class, and the impact they've had on viewership, the popularity of the game, the way they've played and lifted the sport. And on that night, we got to hear from them, their compelling stories. We got to watch them achieve a lifelong dream, but we also got to see them walk the orange carpet and some wardrobe that made an incredible connection with culture and fashion and art, entertainment, all of the things. And I think the way we got there is definitely in the increase of coverage, what this class has brought in terms of attention, but also the influence of social media. Back in 2015, and I know we're going to get to Maya's article very shortly, but Instagram was not as big of a thing as it is now as it pertains to the lifestyle aspect of athletes and how they're elevating in that space. The tunnel fits that we have now, where athletes are expressing themselves. WNBA players are wearing different designers and advocacy wear and things that have really given the WNBA a space beyond just basketball. And those are just a couple of things, but there's also been, I know Devereaux Peters was part of a piece that was written recently about just how WNBA players in the past felt like they had to fall in line with some image of all kind of looking uniform and playing it safe when it came to fashion and culture. So it's been a combination of things, kind of a perfect storm, but that's what I've seen as the progression.
Yeah, I think Devereaux, she said it was something like the most athletic accountants you've ever seen, which is, it's just so funny, but at the same time, it's very striking. You put sort of those photos side by side, and it's incredibly jarring.
Yeah.
So I think before we talk about this Maya Moore piece, which you posted or reposted earlier this week, I do have to ask you, which drafty outfit was your favorite? Because I have one, and I've been wanting to know what everyone else has thought.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking about it this morning. Everyone has been saying that this draft class was like probably the best dressed, but I'm still not over Zaya Cook and Shakira Austin, so I don't know that I can quite say that yet. But it's a tough one for me because I just resonated with so many of the things I saw from a fashion perspective, whether it was Angel Reese and Nika Mule wearing the grills in their mouth, right? The mouth jewelry. Paige Beckers, who wasn't even getting drafted, who looked like the perfectly crafted glass of milk in her all white with Louis Vuitton. But Angel Reese and Cameron Brink really blew me away. Just how they are athletes, but you could also see them as models because they just look stunning in anything they put on. But in particular, just Angel draped in what someone referred to, I heard, as like a Grace Jones look. I'm an old lady, so
yes,
I'm very familiar with Grace Jones. But Cameron Brink, the cut of her dress, the ball mane, and the Jimmy Choo, she looked fantastic. But Alyssa Peely and the indigenous influence on her outfit. You could go a number of ways, but I thought they were all very impressive in the way they showed up and showed us something about their personality or their story through what they were wearing.
For me, it was someone who people may not know as well, and that was Nadia Poch. The color, the way it fit her. I mean, this dress was giving off like Oscar's red carpet. Like that is what I saw that, and I was like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. She wants to make a statement. And I just thought she was way beyond her years as well. But anyway, I love the fashion aspect. I'm glad you do too. So a couple of days ago, I saw you repost this Maya Moore Players Tribune piece, which is from almost a decade ago, like 9 years ago. And it's entitled in parentheses, or the in is in parentheses, and then it says visibility. And you already referenced that. So I think what I want to ask you before we go to our first break is why did you decide to repost that when you did?
That article had been on my mind for a while because I had started to think about the success that we saw in college women's basketball this year and wondering if it would translate to the WNBA. For many years, there's been a disconnect between the college fan and the W fan, even though your hopes is that the popularity of college, which flourishes for any number of reasons, right? The built-in alumni base, the establishment of the athletic programs, the long-time establishment of some of these athletic programs versus how long the WNBA has been around. There's a number of reasons why college basketball is different when you look at the numbers. And when I started to think about that transition and if these fans would translate, I just automatically thought about this piece by Maya Moore, because it was the athlete's insight into what this looked like. Like, we can look at the numbers when it comes to viewership and attendance, and this is what it is on the college side, and this is what it looks like on the WNBA side. But there was a feel to it that Maya Moore gave us going from UConn to Minnesota, and the drop off in coverage and interest. And so I'm always about the firsthand experience of the athlete. And it was something that impacted me personally when it came to my career path. Was I felt very sad that the title was invisibility, that someone as talented and as great as Maya Moore felt unseen. I know what that feels like as a woman, as a Black woman. And so that was number one. But then it was just, how can I help? How can I change this experience for women's basketball? Because I really wholeheartedly believe that when we are all together, college and WNBA, supporting the sport year round, we're stronger. So I always have an interest on what can we learn? What can we read? How can we pay respect to the thoughts of those that have gone through the transition? And how can we learn from their experience and continue to grow the league, both sides of basketball together?
Yeah, I mean, to complement that, Candace Parker did an interview with Charles Barkley and Gayle King recently, where she brought up an experience she had with Diana Taurasi. And DT said to Candace, like, yeah, during your rookie year and that first year transitioning from college to the pros, that's the heyday. And as time goes on, people forget. And so Candace was sort of challenging the league, which we're going to get to in our second segment, about how the league has actually tried to address the drop off and the gap in coverage and change some of these perceptions. But first, we are going to tell you all, or I'm going to tell you all, about our good friends at Yahoo Finance. So, wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? Well, with Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis that you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. I have an investment account with Schwab for my IRA, a savings account at Bank of America, another checking account with Chase, and I use Yahoo Finance to consolidate them in one place, which has made it incredibly easy to manage them. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're seasoned or you're looking for extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and much more. With a community of over 90 million users each month, there is a real strength in helping you on your way to financial success. For a comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoo.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Now, as we shift gears, I do want to talk about our sponsor for this episode, and that is FanDuel. It is playoff time in the NBA and the NHL, although WNBA training camp is right around the corner. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks and threes, all in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Use fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And back to our program that we go. So hello all, I am back with the one and only LaChina Robinson, where we are talking about all things related to the WNBA's public perception and how that has changed over time. LaChina, where I think I want to go back to here is sort of talking about what we saw the WNBA do to start to address this gap in coverage, or the drop off that Diana Taurasi and Candace Parker were talking about.
Yeah, I thought you were going to tell me what they did.
Oh, I mean, I can tell. So we saw there was, I thought, a pretty funny ad campaign that ran throughout the tournament. There was a commercial where Brianna Stewart was eating cereal called Rookie O's, and she was talking about how she wanted to eat those rookies for breakfast, making that joke. Yeah. Then you had Arike Gumbawale in another ad where she was advertising this sunscreen called Shade, and so she was making this point about how, you gotta wear a little bit of shade to compete in the WNBA. And then there was this giant billboard of Asia Wilson, which was all around Cleveland. I don't know what other locations, but it was all around. And it was essentially saying, like, welcome to the W. We're going to show you how it's done. And so I don't think there's been that type of intention before, unless I'm wrong. Maybe there was before.
Yeah. I loved those campaigns. I thought they were great. There is about a month between the WNBA draft and the tip of the season. So that's a lot of time for fans to find somewhere else to land. NBA playoffs are happening. And not to say that all this can't coexist at once, but you want to remind fans that there is a part two. That their favorite NCAA player that just got drafted is going to be participating in a season like a month later. Which is not ideal for these players because the turnaround is brutal, but it does give you an opportunity to capitalize on the momentum, in particular, coming off of the record numbers that we saw at ESPN. I mean, 20 million is just insane for as far as new eyeballs around the game and where those numbers fit comparatively. But I feel like we still have a long ways to go in figuring out how to best utilize that month. I know there's a lot of things that we're working on the ESPN side to try to grow our content. I know that Shanae and Andrea were doing some analyst videos of the players that were getting drafted that, to me, help the WNBA fan or help the college wanting to be WNBA fan understand where these players fit in as pros and what are their strengths. The draft was great, obviously, from an educational standpoint. So I think it's just continuing to have content, conversation, inundating the college fan with information around the WNBA, because that's what's held the league back for so long, is people are like, oh, wait, when's the season start? And when's this happening? And when are the storylines? And what we found in this year's class is that storylines are driving, this narrative is driving the interest in the sport. So, again, we still have a long ways to go, but I do see the efforts on behalf of W and ESPN and many others, Locked On Women's Basketball, so many other outlets that are trying to help make that connection.
Absolutely. So I just want to ask you, because I definitely had some moments on draft night as well, but did you talk to some of the draftees about their WNBA memories? Like, what did they have to say sort of about how they have viewed the league over time?
Yeah, I have had a couple conversations with different players, and it all varies depending on their access to sport,
Mm.
We have international players who may not have had the same level of exposure to the W. Yes, they have to the pro game. But then you have some that went to WNBA games when they were younger. I mean, this is a generation that has grown up with the WNBA. And so that was really cool. And that actually was great to read in Maya Moore's experience, is that she remembers Cynthia Cooper and the players she looked up to growing up. Maya is so funny. She's lived a couple of different places like Missouri, Atlanta, but she said she kind of jumped around a little bit as a fan. So she remembers vividly those touch points with women's basketball and with the WNBA particularly, and how that drove her career. So that's important for the visibility of the WNBA to be at a place where these women can have something to aspire to and have a vision of what their careers could be.
Yeah, it was fascinating to listen to some of what they had to say. I sort of, when players would come in, I would just ask the simple question, like, what did they remember, and how has their view of the WNBA changed, and how has the public view changed? And Cameron Brink was really honest, and I really appreciated that. She told this story, which I think many people know now, about how her mom was working for Nike on Dawn Staley's signature shoe. And so that history has been ingrained into Cameron's life because of her mom. And Cameron also said, hey, like, I was really disappointed seeing how people would just hate on the WNBA all the time. How people would just go on the internet and just be hateful, or people would go on television, prior to Caitlyn Clark hopping onto SNL. SNL always, well, not always, often would take opportunities to make jokes that were quite offensive to the WNBA. So the fact that Cam could say, hey, like, I see a change, I feel a change, that matters.
Yeah, it does. And again, I go back to social media because I don't know the needle has moved as much as we would like in a linear space. Over the last couple of years, Fox just had their first ever college women's basketball broadcast. NBC had their first ever, when you think about how long these networks have been around and, around women's basketball. Like, we're getting there in the linear space, but in social, they have access right on their phones to what people are saying. They can get on YouTube and watch highlights. They can get to know other WNBA players. So it's really helped women's sports a lot in overall. But also, again, there's this generation that has had the WNBA their whole lives, and their parents played. Rakia's mom played. Cam Brink's mom played. Like, so it was very tangible for them to think about the pipeline of women's basketball and how they got into the sport, but also how they sustained their exposure and their interest.
Yeah, it's interesting because then there was a comment from Liz Kitley who sort of said, hey, like, I began playing the sport a bit later in life. I was playing it in late middle school, early high school, and she really didn't know a lot about the W because it wasn't put on TV in the way that it is today. And I will never forget covering a high school girls basketball team in 2019 and going up to the star player on one of the teams and asking her questions. And she said to me, wow, I felt like we were like the Golden State Warriors out there. And I sighed because I'm thinking, what about the Washington Mystics, who just won the championship and shot like boatloads of threes to do so? What about the Seattle Storm, who played at a modern style in 2019 as well? Yeah. So it's interesting to sort of hear these different stories of these different young people and how they're affected by the coverage or the lack thereof.
Yeah, and two things. Liz Kitley, if I'm not mistaken, said that one of her touch points with the W was through Wake Forest with De'Erica Hamby. She went to watch De'Erica play at Wake, and then De'Erica got drafted, I think, 5th overall back in maybe 2017, something like that. And so she got to see a college women's basketball player kind of matriculate to that next level. She's from North Carolina, so that was a touch point for her. But the other thing that WNBA players that are doing to expose the next generation, I don't think people recognize enough, is that they have their own AAU teams. Sylvia Fowles has a team. Diana Taurasi has a team. Skylar Diggins-Smith has a team. Like, they have their own AAU teams and organizations. And so these young players are growing up with the WNBA players' names on their chest and seeing them come to practice and getting shoes gifted to them, from them. That's a story I'd really be interested in hearing, is the experience of these girls that are playing grassroots basketball for organizations that are funded or owned or run by WNBA players, and how that shifted what they see now as a WNBA experience or the WNBA space. Like, how has that changed or transformed what they knew prior to?
Oof, that is quite a story idea. Maybe we'll both pursue it in different ways, because it's one that 1000% deserves to be told. Coming up in our final segment, we're going to get into how WNBA history has become a real constant conversation when it comes to discussing the perception of the league itself. But first, I do want to speak about our good friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you are hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right pros for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. It helps you hire pros you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn's users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making that process easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you, LinkedIn Jobs, although you gave me a bit of a tongue twister there, but that is no worries. We are back. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a simple question, LaChina, which is, why does WNBA history matter in this conversation about this new draft class and the big women's basketball boom?
History always matters. We can't fully understand the moment we're living in if we don't understand where we came from and how we got there. The WNBA was built on the backs of players that, had very little to work with in stretches, who were told no over their careers, who didn't have AAU teams to play with other women, who have fought to break through glass ceilings and open up doors for the generation coming behind them. So in understanding that, in understanding how the WNBA started, it gives us some insight into how we can continue the growth that we've seen. What were those turning points? What were the instrumental changes to how the league was doing things, what was happening in the world, how players were expressing themselves, changes in the game rules? Like, there's so many things that happen, and it's almost like the perfect storm when various media entities or grassroots media entities started. There's just so many things that happen along the way, and I love history. And to me, when people truly understand and are educated on any given topic, that gives them an opportunity to become more invested, because you never know what their interest may be along that journey of history that they hold on to, that makes them feel like a valued fan, like an educated fan, that takes them from, maybe casually invested in the WNBA to committed. And so the more we share, the more opportunity we have to connect a new fan or someone who is interested in the sport.
It's just been fascinating, I think, to look online whenever we see people talking about, obviously, Caitlyn Clark in the way that she's spoken about. And obviously she deserves a lot of that praise, but you
Mhm.
see a lot of folks coming out of the woodwork and saying, hey, like, but look at this person who did this and who is under recognized. I mean, the fact that Lynette Woodard, who was on this very show recently, has gotten the platform she's gotten as of late. I just wonder, is this something, I don't know if I'm going to say special to women's basketball and women's sports, or was the NBA like this? I just wonder why it feels like this is such an important part of the WNBA's growth.
Yeah, my dad has been talking to me about this in the last just 3 or 4 weeks in particular, about the impact of Caitlyn Clark and comparing it to Larry Bird, and how, before Larry and Magic came along, especially Larry, the game was hidden, and the NBA wasn't anywhere near the popular platform that we see it as today. Now, obviously, time is an indicator of a lot of things when it comes to the growth of a brand or a league or anything of that nature. But I've often thought that women's basketball has not been as supported or accepted because Black women are the prominent faces in the sport. And sport's no different than the real world. Look at pay equity, look at leadership positions. Speaking of invisibility, that's often been the experience of Black women. And so Caitlyn Clark comes along as someone who is generationally talented, whose basketball and style of play has pulled in just a ton of new fans. My stepmom being one of them, who's always been a fan, but she feels like Caitlyn Clark is at the top of the food chain. And she comes along in a society where she is viewed as more marketable by the popular generation, right? Like, or I guess what I'm trying to say, by mainstream America, right? Like, she has those other checkpoints of what it looks like to be a woman athlete superstar. That's not necessarily been the face of the history of WNBA. So Caitlyn has opened up this door in society that wasn't open previously to many people in the WNBA, much like the impact of Larry Bird. So it's an interesting time that we find ourselves in, and one that I think we all can celebrate, whether it's someone who has played and started out the league 27, 28 years ago, or this generation that's here now. It takes the efforts of everyone to get us to a place where we've seen this explosion in women's basketball popularity. And it does take the brands investing in the sponsorship deals. It takes the media. It takes high level of play in basketball. It takes great storytelling around these athletes and their just personalities, and getting to know them. So it's the perfect storm of a lot of things. But to me, Caitlyn has opened a door that has previously been closed for a lot of women who have been the face of the W. And when I say the face, they've been the leading figures on the court for women's basketball for many years.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a chat with one of your colleagues in Katie Barnes, and Katie was sort of saying to me, like, I wish more people viewed this as more cumulative, that Caitlyn Clark is cumulative, and so I guess, what do you make of that fact, and how do we get there to it being more of a cumulative discussion rather than just one face?
I talked about this a little bit yesterday on Twitter, but it takes people who are really invested in telling the story of women's basketball and its evolution versus just jumping on the hot topic in the moment. And not to say that, I believe Caitlyn deserves all of this, but I also believe Maya Moore deserved all of this. I also believe that Lisa Leslie deserved all of this. So it takes people, to your point a moment ago about history, that don't want to just tell a story in hopes of looking connected to women's basketball, but really investing in all the storylines that have come over time to get the sport to where it is. And I have to give credit to these women who are playing now. Even Caitlyn Clark on Saturday Night Live said hey, I've been doing this on the back of many legends and gave flowers to the Cheryl Swoops of the world and all the others that, have really brought this league to where it is now. So it just takes people in media and other spaces to want to dig deeper into how we actually got here instead of just trying to make this about the moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I read something on Defector from My3 Anantharaman, and she sort of was talking about how the WNBA is a two-way street. The quote she has here, and I will put this article in the show notes because it's a great piece. Quote, give a 9-year-old Caitlyn Clark something to shoot for and she'll do her part to get there. She is happening to the WNBA because the WNBA happened to her. And she and the WNBA will happen to someone else who will also make the league a little bit better and a little more appealing to the next 9-year-old. In exchange for a real and stable place to play, these women can offer their astonishing talents. WNBA players have always held up their end of the bargain. This draft class says that it wasn't in vain.
That's beautiful. And I could not agree more. I think had Caitlyn Clark not seen Maya Moore, who was her favorite player growing up, had she not had that vision, would she be the Caitlyn Clark she is today? Who knows?
We don't know. But what we do know is we want to thank all of you listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen each and every day. I want to give a huge thank you to LaChina Robinson for hopping on the show today. And it was just a great time to discuss these topics that clearly mean a lot to both of us. LaChina, where should people find you and follow all of your great work?
Yeah, I'm on all social handles as at LaChina Robinson, LACHINA, last name Robinson. You'll see me on ESPN's coverage of the WNBA throughout the summer, including our feature off day that I'm really proud of. That gives us some looks inside how WNBA players like to chill in their downtime. WNBA Countdown, which I'm also very proud of and will be a host of. And yeah, I just watch the games. Forget about me. Watch the WNBA. So that would be that's where you can find me.
This has been Jackie Powell alongside
LaChina Robinson.
And we are signing off. Have a great weekend, women's basketball fans.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team